High school was typically uneventful until the day Alex showed up. He was a quiet, strange guy, always seen alone in the hallways. At first, there was nothing remarkable about him, but after a few weeks, things began to change. One day, I noticed he was doodling in his notebook during class. It started innocently enough, just random scribbles. But over time, his drawings became disturbing. I started to notice oddly dark tones to his doodles. Twisted faces, distorted creatures, and strange symbols filled the pages. There was one lesson with Alex that changed everything. Tyrone was a typical bully and problem child. He would torment almost everyone equally. Today, Alex was his victim. He grabbed Alex's notebook and started looking through his drawings and loudly mocking him. I don't know what came over me, but I half-jokingly shouted Tyrone's name and said, "Leave him alone." I awkwardly laughed as to not become Tyrone's next target. Suddenly, someone at the front of the class tripped over a box, and Tyrone's attention was completely pulled away from us. You should have seen the look on Alex's face. I don't think I'd ever seen him smile until now. He was sat there with his notebook in hand, staring at me with the creepiest grin. He thanked me and muttered something to himself about not having to kill anyone today. It reminded me of Gollum from Lord of the Rings. After that day, he was practically my shadow. He'd follow me everywhere, always standing a few steps away from me. He didn't ever have much to say, but he would occasionally make comments about people like Tyrone, and we'd all laugh at how dark his humor was. Over time, he started sharing his drawings with me. They were all pretty messed up. He even had some detailed drawings of Tyrone being tortured or stabbed. On the odd occasion when he did speak, the things he would say were unsettling, muttering about hidden threats and the consequences that were coming. Looking back, it was so obvious what he was going to do, but I kind of convinced myself he just had a dark humor and used his drawings to vent. There were a few notable moments with him over the next few months. He would aggressively defend me in the hallway whenever someone would barge into me. He'd push people out of my way and do these really weird death stares at anyone that would bother me. He was very attached to me and protective. It seemed like as the days went on, he just became more and more angry at the world, muttering more about what he wanted to do to people, telling me that I'm one of the good ones and that he'll never let them hurt me. Towards the end of winter, Alex had a week off school and I started to wonder if he was all right. I'd also noticed at this point that his locker started to smell really bad. I knew his code because I'd seen him put it in so many times, and he didn't seem to care that I would watch. I guess curiosity got the better of me, and I entered his code and opened his locker door. I can't describe just how powerful the smell was. It didn't just knock me back, it sent me into a coughing fit. It was obvious now why it stank so much. I probably don't need to tell you what I found. A collection of small animals. I remember a cat, a rabbit, and some mice. I immediately closed the door again and started to panic. I knew I couldn't just ignore this. I immediately told my teacher about what I'd seen, knowing I might get into trouble for accessing someone else's locker. They ended up closing the whole corridor and getting the police involved. They found multiple hunting knives and all of his disturbing drawings. We never did find out about what happened to him other than the fact that he was kicked out of school and some more security measures were put in place to prevent weapons being brought into school. I don't know what he was planning or if it was just animals he liked killing, but I feel like if I didn't check his locker, he might have come back and done something seriously bad. I remember the first day when we had this substitute teacher, Mr. Roberts. He had a reputation that spread like wildfire among the students. Everyone said he was weird and would creep everyone out. That day, I was about to find out for myself. Mr. Roberts walked into our classroom, and right from the start, something felt off. He had this unnerving way of looking at each one of us, as if he was sizing us up. His eyes were piercing, like he was trying to see into our souls. As the lesson began, he spoke in a monotone voice that made it hard to stay awake. He covered a subject that should have been interesting but somehow managed to make it utterly boring. I glanced around the room, and my classmates had expressions of utter boredom or mild discomfort. What really creeped me out, though, were his mannerisms. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was more of a grimace than anything resembling happiness. His movements were jerky and erratic, like he couldn't control his own body. Towards the end of the lesson, some of my classmates decided to test the waters. They asked him personal questions, trying to get to know him better. But his responses were strange. He'd laugh at random moments and make bizarre comments that left us scratching our heads. Then came the incident that really got my guard up. One of my classmates, Alex, asked about his past teaching experiences. Mr. Roberts hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting around the room. Then, in a low, almost whispered voice, he said,
"I've taught in many places, but they were all temporary."
It was as if he was hinting at something darker, something he didn't want us to know. The room fell silent, and everyone felt the awkwardness. We had him twice in the same day, and the afternoon lesson was even more weird than the one in the morning. Mr. Roberts' behavior only grew more unsettling. He would suddenly stop talking mid-sentence and stare blankly at the back of the classroom, clearly lost in his thoughts. Then, without warning, he'd snap back to reality and continue as if nothing had happened. When the final bell rang, the whole class breathed a collective sigh of relief. We couldn't get out of that classroom fast enough. As I walked out, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Roberts was hiding something that made him more than just a creepy substitute. And I hoped I wouldn't have to see him again anytime soon. Our history teacher disappeared halfway through the year and Mr. Roberts took over our class. We'd see him twice a week. Whenever I was in his classes, I would do my best to just focus on my studies. The rest of the school year passed without any serious incidents, just the regular blank staring and growing rumors about how weird he was. Towards the end of the year, after we'd all kinda gotten used to his demeanor, Mr. Roberts crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. During a history lesson, he made a bizarre and inappropriate comment about one of the female students. It was so disturbing that the student immediately reported it to the school authorities. The school administration acted swiftly, launching an investigation into Mr. Roberts' past. It didn't take long for them to uncover a disturbing criminal history. He had been involved in a series of troubling incidents at his previous schools, including allegations of inappropriate behavior and comments. The revelation sent shockwaves through our school, and parents demanded answers. How had the school hired someone with such a dark past? The school board faced intense scrutiny, and many called for a complete overhaul of the hiring process. Mr. Roberts was immediately suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. As more details emerged about his past, it became clear that he should never have been allowed near children. The school took responsibility for its failure to properly vet him and promised to implement stricter hiring practices in the future. While Mr. Roberts was never seen at the school again, the unsettling feeling that had hung over our classroom didn't dissipate easily. The incident served as a chilling reminder of how important it was to remain vigilant and speak up when something didn't seem right. It's weird because people who had his lessons actually improved their grades. He wasn't a bad teacher, just a bad person. After he disappeared, there were multiple rumors about him working at another school a few miles away. I always wonder what happened with him. I was a junior in high school when it all started. Mr. Simmons, our English teacher, had always been a bit eccentric, but this year, something changed. He became fixated on me, and it became incredibly uncomfortable. At first, it was harmless. He would compliment my essays or ask me to stay after school to discuss my studies. I didn't think much of it, assuming he was just trying to be a helpful teacher. But soon, it escalated. He started showing up at places he shouldn't have known about, my part-time job at the local bookstore or my favorite coffee shop. Every time, he'd strike up a conversation, making it clear he'd been tracking my activities. It was unnerving, but I hesitated to say anything, fearing it might be a misunderstanding. Then came the gifts, flowers left on my doorstep, anonymous notes in my locker, and even a mixtape of romantic songs. It became impossible to deny that something was terribly wrong. The final straw was when he cornered me after school, professing his love and suggesting we go away together. I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. I confided in my closest friends, who immediately took action. They encouraged me to report Mr. Simmons to the principal. We compiled evidence, texts, notes, and witness accounts of his strange behavior. When we confronted the principal, she was shocked but supportive. She assured us she would investigate the matter thoroughly. What we didn't expect was the revelation that Mr. Simmons had a history of similar obsessions with students at his previous schools. The investigation unveiled a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior. Parents were outraged, and the local news caught wind of the scandal. Eventually, the police got involved, and Mr. Simmons was arrested. Most people were furious about the fact that he'd already been caught doing this in the past. Why was he allowed to teach again? Did the school know about his past, or did they not even check? You'd think we'd have better systems to protect children from predators like this.